Welcome to another video tutorial. In this video, we're going to take a look at how to create a couple of interaction events, which I think people might be interested to know how to do. So the first of those is how to sit in a chair, but also how to lay down on a bed and go to sleep, that sort of thing. So you might want to make an RPG where your character can go to bed or they can sit down in chairs, that sort of thing. So obviously there's lots of other things that you might want to do in a game that you might want to interact with in some sort of animated way. So you can take this idea and then run with it once you know sort of the process. So in this video, I'm going to outline the process by which I would go about doing these things, so you can sort of get an idea. Now, before we get started, let me just mention that there's going to be a forum thread created for this video that's going to contain not only the link to this video, although, you're already watching it, so you shouldn't need that, but nonetheless, the video will be linked in the forum thread. In the forum thread will also be the project files for this, so if you want to download them and open them up inside RPG in a Box and mess around with the models and things themselves, you can feel free to do that. But also, if you have any questions or comments you want to make about this after watching the video, feel free to post in the forum thread, and I will be sure to respond to any questions and comments that are left in that forum. I will also contribute to forum threads and things if I think of any ideas after doing the video that I think, it might be good for people to know this and that. And I will, of course, further add things in the forum thread as well. So it's a good idea to sort of check in with the forum thread for these things every now and then, because new ideas or comments or questions that have answers to them will be in there that you might find useful to know. The link to the forum thread will be in the YouTube description. So if you want to know where that is, it will be in the YouTube description. So let's go through this. So for this tutorial, I'm going to demonstrate both a bed and a chair. So we're going to have a sitting and a lying example. So the first thing we need to do is we need to edit our player character. Okay. Now, what I've done is I've gone ahead and created a animation on my player character called idle_gone. Obviously, you can call it whatever you want, but for me, that name makes sense because it's the idle animation, and but it's a different one to the default one, in the sense that if you play this one, there's no model. Okay, so essentially, what this idle animation is, if we look at frame 37, is it's literally just a frame without any voxels in it. And if we go to the animation settings, we can see that idle gone is frame 37 to frame 37 on a loop. So it's just playing this one frame over and over and over again. Okay. So there's two methods of making the player invisible, because part of this method is you need to make the actual player character invisible. Okay, so one way is to give your player an idle animation like we have just here, where there is no visible player. Okay, the other way, and I'm going to show you both in this video, we'll actually use both of them, but the other way is to place underneath the map a tile and give it an ID. In this case, I've given it the ID under_map. So it's under map. Okay. Now you need to make sure that this tile is placed at a height that is taller than your player model. So the height of this player model is 20. So I've put this tile 36 lower than 0. So if we go down, that's the height that the tile is at, minus 36, whereas the floor of the building is at 0. So you just want to make sure, if you're going to do this method, that you've got enough height underneath your map so the player's head isn't sort of poking through the floor. 36 might be too much, but at the end of the day, I've just made sure I've given myself plenty of room to place the player on that tile without any issue. Okay, so we're back to grid height 0. So once you've created either of those methods, whether it's a tile underneath the map or an animation on your player character that's got a loop, there's a single frame with no voxels in it, then you're ready to move on to the next stage. And then the next stage is you need to make a duplicate model of your player character. So in this case, Justin here is a character. Okay, he's listed in the characters tab. Okay, and he's got 37 frames of animation because he's got things like attack, climb, death, idle, interact, push, shoot, slide, throw, walk. These are all the animations that are needed for a player character. And obviously he's got things like stats, so how much health he's got, all of this sort of stuff. So this is a player character, okay? What you need to do is you then need to click Save As and change this from character to object. And then you're going to give this a name, for example, player model or player object or something. Just give it a name. Obviously, I've already got that, so I'm not going to save it as that, but in this case, player object. Or you could call it player standing, because the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a version of the player that's standing, okay? But the point is you want to save this as an object. What that will do is that will then create in the Objects tab a copy of your player character with all of the frames and animations, but now it's an object rather than a player character. You then want to go to open and edit your object model and delete all of the frames. So I've got one here, for example, I don't need. Let me just get rid of that. Sorry. And delete that one. Okay. You're going to want to delete all the frames. So it's just one frame of the idle animation of the player just standing. Okay. Once you've done that, you then want to place an attach point. So go to the attach point button and click and create an attach point. Call it whatever you want. This one is called, let's just select it. Also, I still have to scroll down. It's called waste, but you can call it whatever you want. Okay. And that is your player object. So it's literally just a duplicate of the player character with one frame of the player with an attach point on them somewhere. Okay. Remove all the other attach points like head, right hand, left hand. This should just be its own thing, just an object with no attach points other than the one you create here called waste. Okay. Then you're going to want to make another copy of this character. So let's just save this model. You're then going to want to create another copy of this character, but edit frame 1 so that they're in a seated position, and place another attach point. You could either use the waist one or you could create a different one. It's entirely up to you. I've created one called seat, and that's positioned there. Okay. Once you've done that, you then move on to the bed and the chair objects. So let's take a look at the bed one, for example. If we load the bed model up in the voxel editor, we can see we've got a bed model, and it's just got one frame, and it has an attach point. And if we click on the attach point, we can see it's called bed_flat. Again, you can call these whatever you want. The next thing you're going to want to do is you're then going to want to click with the bed model open. You're going to want to click this button here, the Configure Attached Objects and Effects button. With this clicked, you're going to want to make sure the attach point is the one on your bed, so bed_flat. The object model in this case is player object, the one that's standing. And then the attach point upon which you want to attach the player to the bed. So bed flat is the bed's attach point, waist is the player object's attach point. So we're going to leave it as that. Do not tick automatically attach this object in game. Otherwise, when you spawn in, you'll see this player object already on the bed, which you don't want. So leave this unticked, but then click OK. and you'll see the player object on the bed. Now, yours won't look like this because by default, these offsets and rotations will need to be set. I've already set them, so it's already saved how I want the model to look when it's attached to the bed. So by default, it's probably going to look more like that and things. So you're going to have to mess around with the rotation. So in my case, -90, so that he's facing that way. And then you might want to move his position on the bed. So maybe moving forward a bit or back a bit, up a bit. It's entirely up to you how the model is then positioned on the bed. But once you're happy with that, you then click save, and that will save the position of the model when it's attached to that position, okay? And then you're going to want to do the exact same thing with the chair. So you're going to want to load up the chair model. You're going to want to create an attach point on the chair, which I've called seat. And then you're going to want to click, make sure you save it first. You're then going to want to click the configure attached objects button, select player sit this time, and their attach point is the same name, so it's fine. Again, we don't want to automatically attach, otherwise we'll see them sitting, we'll see a duplicate basically of the player already sat on the chair in the game, which we don't want. Click OK, and then again, you will match the player to the seat. So you'll have to move them around, position them. Obviously, this chair looks really tiny compared to Justin, so we could mess around with the scale of Justin, for example, by messing around with the scale factor on the attach point on the seat. So we could maybe make this 0.7, 0.7, 0.7, move Justin down a bit. Move Justin towards the back a bit. Something like that. Now, obviously, it's going to take some work because, as we can see now, Justin's feet aren't touching the ground anymore. So then you've got to go to the model, adjust the player model, the sitting model, to fit. You're going to have to go back and forth between the chair and the sitting model to make sure you get what it is you're looking for. You need to make sure that this fits the model that you're trying to link them with. So sitting is obviously a lot more complicated than lying down because you can just literally have the model 90 degrees and just put them on top of a flat surface. Here you're going to have to mold them to another object. So for now, just because that would just take too much work, even though it looks slightly ridiculous, I'm going to leave it as 1-to-1 because I've already done that. I need to undo the offset though. Let's just have a look from the front. Yeah, it's still too high. And then move forward. Something like that, that'll do. Okay. So at the end of the day, as long as it gives the idea that they are sat on a chair. Okay. So once you're happy with that, you then save your chair model. And then the final bit is to put the script into place that does all of these things. So my bed object already has a script already attached to it. But what we'll do is we'll remove this script and we'll come back to it. So I'm just going to cut that from there. Actually, I'm going to have to cancel that. So we will say none to that. Save. So we'll go through it one by one. So what we'll do now is we'll place our our bed model somewhere in the world. So let's just say there. Obviously, we'll delete the nav mesh. We'll come back to that. Let's just put an orange interaction line going that way. We'll even have one that way, like that. Then we'll place our chair, let's say, up against this wall. And put the interaction lines back. Okay, so let's start with the bed first. So what you want to do is you then want to select the bed object. If you want to give it an ID, you can do. I don't think you need it because the script is going to basically reference self whenever we want to reference the bed. But, if you just want to give it one, just so that, it's got one for later use for something else. It's always a good idea to give things IDs anyway. Good habit to sort of get into. Then you're going to go to the scripts section of the placed bed object. And on the character interacts trigger event, you can either write a script and then assign it, or we could click quick script and just write directly into here. Obviously, if you're more comfortable with the visual script editor, then you're going to actually want to make a script file. So let's do that. Let's actually go to the script editor and we'll make a new script file, which we'll call bed. And we're going to paste the code that I cut earlier, and I'll talk about what this code does. So here's the code. So let's go to the visual script editor and I'll walk you through it. So the first thing this script does is it locks the camera. So once the player interacts, in this case with the bed, the camera is going to get locked in place so that the player can't then move the camera around while all of this is happening. The next thing it does is it locks the player's ability to move. You could also lock their ability to interact if you want to. That might be a good idea. So let me just duplicate that. We'll throw one of those in. Actually, that's the wrong thing. We want to lock the player's ability to interact. We'll just throw one of those in. Move that back a bit. Just save that. If I just click edit here and then apply and save, go back, that puts things in a bit nicer. So we lock the camera, we lock their ability to move, we also lock their ability to interact. And then here's the important bit for making the player invisible. We then override animation. We're going to reference the player because that's who we're playing as. So I'm going to reference the player and it's going to set their idle animation to idle gone. That's going to make them disappear because the idle gone animation doesn't have any voxels on it. So it's going to basically make them idle but be invisible. Okay. And then because we can't move or interact, the player's then not going to be able to change this animation because they can't move. They can't go from idle to walk, which would then bring the player back. So because we're locking their ability to move, they can't ever come out of this idle animation while this process is going on, if that makes sense. After we override the animation, we're then going to attach object. We're going to attach the player object to self, which is the bed, because this script is going to go on the bed. So self is going to be a reference to the bed. So you don't need to type bed1 or anything like that. Just use self. So we're going to attach the player object to self. And then the waist is the attach point on the player object, and bed flat is the attach point on the bed object on self. And then what I do is I display a message. You know, at this point, the player is now on the bed. So you could leave it at this if you wanted to, but just to make it a bit more interesting, I then got a display message afterwards that says you lie down and take a quick nap. That then leads to a fade out of 3 seconds, then a wait of 3 seconds, and then a fade in of 3 seconds. And then after the fade in, it then detaches the object. So it's going to detach whatever is attached to self, in this case bed, whatever is attached to bed on the bed flat attach point. Well, that's this player object. So it's going to remove the player model from being on the bed. Then it's going to override the animation for the player. That idle animation is going to go back to being idle again. So that's going to bring the visual player back. You're going to see the player model again. And then it's going to obviously unlock player movement. We would now need to unlock player interaction as well. So let's do that. And then it resets the camera because it was locked at the beginning. So we unlock the camera by resetting it, and then end with a display message saying you awaken, feeling fully energized or restored or whatever you want to put. Okay. Now you could also do all of this, detach object and override animation, while the screen is faded out. So we could move these, for example, these two. I'm not going to, but if you wanted to change the way things happen, you could move those two in between the wait and the fade in. So then that way, it fades into you already out of bed. In this case, what's going to happen is it's going to fade in, and then the player is going to literally jump out of bed. So it's up to you how you want to go about doing that, okay? So what we'll do is we'll save that. We'll just go into the script editor, just so I can click edit and apply and save. That just means now that it's put that node in the neat order. So that's our bed script. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go to the map editor, click our bed, go to the entity properties, character interacts, set this to bed. And there's our script, okay? And we'll click save. Okay, so that will be the bed. So we'll check that in a second, but let's also set up the chair while we're at it. So same thing again, we're going to go to the script editor. I'm going to save as, because it's going to be kind of the same, but just with some minor differences. So I'm going to call this chair instead. And lock camera, we obviously want to do that. We want to lock the player's ability to move and their ability to interact. But this time, we're not going to use the animation. We're going to move them to that tile that's underneath the map. So we'll get rid of that. And this time what we'll do is we're going to use a put player command. And the tile is going to be one I created earlier called under map. And doesn't matter the direction, because the point is we're not going to see the player, they're underneath the map. And we'll just link that up. And because they can't move or interact, we're not going to be able to, even if they could move off of that tile, they're not going to be able to. Then we're going to attach, in this case, player sit to self, because we're going to put this script on the chair, so we don't need to specify the chair ID. Both of them are the seat attach point, so we actually don't need the third one, because the fourth parameter, because it's the same ID as the object. So both seat attachments are going to connect together, because there's a seat attachment on the chair, but there's also one on this model as well. That's the benefit of giving two models the same attach point name, is you only need to reference the attach point name once, and it will link those two together. We could have a message. You sit down and take a quick break. We could fade out and wait and then fade in again, or we could just say let's just have a wait of a few seconds. Let's just say 3 seconds, and then we'll connect that up to the rest of the script. Right, so wait gets connected to detach object. We want to detach self on the seat attach point. And then we want to override animation. No, we don't want to do that. We want to put the player back. Now here's the important thing. With the put, it's a little bit more complicated. And I'm going to put the put entity thing in first in the Visual Script Editor, but I'm actually going to go to the code, because I'm going to have to write something. It's easier to do it in code than it is to do it on the Visual Script Editor. So forgive me in a minute for jumping into the code down here. That should be put player, sorry, not put entity. And yeah, we're going to have to fill that in differently in a minute. And then obviously we want to unlock the ability to move, unlock the ability to interact, reset the camera, and then we'll have a message that says, something like that, okay? So what we need to do at the beginning of our script is we need to store where the player currently is, okay? Because we need to put them back there once the process is finished. So we're going to create a local variable, which I'll call $player coord equals player dot coordinate. So that will just store the coordinates the player currently is at the time the script is executed. So it will store the coordinates, then lock the camera, lock their movement, lock their interaction, then put them under the map. And then in the put player here, what we actually need to do is type the following in the brackets. Tile, open and close square brackets, $player coordinate dot x. I think this will just work. $player underscore coordinate dot y, $player underscore coordinate dot z. Okay, so that will put them back where they initially were, and we'll leave the direction unchanged, and we need to do that also here so they don't change their direction, because obviously we want it to still look like you just interacted with it. Okay, apply and save. Okay, and then we go to the map editor, click our chair, go to entity properties, character interacts event, and chair. Okay, so let's go into game and test these things out. So here we are in game. So if I click on the bed, I think what it might be is there a setting on the object. Let me just check. I think it might be on the object themselves. Yes, you want to turn this off. Play interact animation, turn that off on the bed. Do the same with the chair. Then that way you won't get that. You won't have to wait for the interact animation to finish before the rest of the script triggers. So now, if we click the bed, immediately lies down. But obviously what's really happening behind the scenes is the player's still here, but they're now just idle, invisible. So they're still standing there, but they're just invisible, and the player can't move or click on anything because we've locked that ability to do so. And then we've just attached the duplicate model that's laying down on the bed. And then we've got a message, you lay down and take a quick nap. It fades out for 3 seconds, waits for 3 seconds, fades in for 3 seconds, and then it detaches the model and then brings us back into the same, it basically makes us visible again, and then unlocks our ability to move and interact, and then gives us this message. And now we can move around again. And that will happen no matter where you click the bed. So if I click at the foot of the bed, I'll now be invisible here. So even if I rotate the camera, which I can't anyway, because I'm obviously locked the ability to do so, but when it comes back, there you go, I'll appear here again. Okay, now let's try our chair. And there we go. You'll sit down and take a quick break. And then this will just be a 3-second pause. And then that's enough of that. Time to get on with things, right? So that is in essence how to create those sorts of things, where when you interact with an object and you want the player to sit on the chair or lie down on a bed or, I don't know, whatever you want, whether it's, get into a shower, or I'm trying to think of all the possible things you might want a player to interact with that they then sort of animate with. What you basically do is you hide the player, and then that model will have an attach point, whether it's a shower or a bath or a bed or a chair or whatever it is, will have an attach point on it that you then put a duplicate static model of the player on, that you can scale and rotate and offset so that it looks correct for what the player would look like if they were now lying on the bed. But the reality of the situation is the player isn't on the bed. The player's still here in this case, just invisible and can't move. So whoever's playing the game, the player, wouldn't actually know that that's not the player, because they can see the player lying down on the bed. And then obviously you let the sequence play out, and then you undo everything. So you remove the model from the bed, and then you bring the visual player back, So there's the player again, and now they can move around again. And same with the chair. You put the player underneath the map in this case, but you've locked the camera, so the camera doesn't follow the player underneath the map. That's important to know as well. Make sure you do all the locking the camera stuff first before you move or hide the player, so that way the camera isn't following the player or anything like that. So you as the player of the game wouldn't know the player has been teleported somewhere because the camera is still looking at the chair. And now you see the model sat on the chair, and then you go through the sequence, and then it hides the model, and then literally puts the player model back to where they started from, and then unlocks the camera, so now they can move around again. And if we approach the chair from the side, like so, when it puts us back, it puts us back on the side, because that's why we stored the player coordinates into that variable at the start of the script, so it knows that we were here, not here, when we clicked on the chair. So when it puts us back from being underneath the map, it puts us back to this tile rather than putting us here. Okay? So that will pretty much cover how to do this, really. There's, at this point, anything else, any other type of objects would just be a variation of this. So hopefully this is giving you an idea of how to do this. And the beautiful thing about these two particular scripts, like the chair script and the bed script, is it doesn't matter what, if we had a different chair, for example, let's say I went to the asset library and I placed another chair into the map. Let's say this one. I don't think that worked. Hold on. For some reason it didn't accept it. There we go. Let's say I place this chair in the map and I rotate it. Click. And then place... Oops, wrong one. Place those lines down, like so. All I have to do is click on this chair, go to Character Interacts and put the chair script on it. And this same script will work on this, because there's nothing in this script, if we edit it, that's specific to that chair. Because we're using self for the attach object on the chair, and player is always a dynamic reference to the player, and we're using the player's coordinates from where they are. And also, even if we had another bed, the same thing applies to the bed script, because if we just open that up again, we're just setting the animation that's already on the player to idle gone and setting it back. So it doesn't matter where the bed is or which bed it is, the same scripts will work across different objects. The only thing that will be an issue with this chair compared to this one is that we've custom fit the player model when it's attached to that chair model. So you will have to obviously edit this chair in terms of go into the chair model, give it an attach point because it doesn't currently have one, called seat, for example. You're then going to have to preview the player sitting model on this chair and position it and scale it and rotate it to fit the chair. So you will have to do that for every chair that you want the player to sit on. But in terms of scripting the chairs and the beds, you only need to put the script on, because the scripts themselves are very versatile. They're not pointing to any specific bed or any specific chair. Because they're using self, that means you can basically put the chair script on any chair, and when the player clicks on that chair, as long as the model has got an attach point on that chair and everything like that, then they will sit on the chair. Same with the bed. As long as the bed has the right attach point names to match the bed system that we've set up already, then any bed can have the same bed script and it will work. So that will bring us to the end of this video. Obviously, it's been a bit different this one, because normally I would sort of create these things and you would follow along step by step. But because making models is time consuming, I'd already gone ahead and, created the bed and the player models and things. So in that case, I was just walking you through how you then set them up. So hopefully me explaining the process has been enough. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, there is going to be a forum thread to this video and to the project download. If you want to download the project and mess around with it inside RPG in a Box, feel free to do so. But inside that thread as well, if you've got any questions or comments you want to sort of make about this video, you can reach out to me there. and I'll answer all the questions that are asked about this. If there's anything I can clear up, as I say, feel free to post in the forum thread. The link to that thread will be in the YouTube description, so do look for that in the YouTube description. But with that said, that will bring us to the end of this video. Hopefully it was helpful and interesting and it's been useful to you. And I'll see you in the next tutorial.